This one's big, people. A new paper published in the journal Nature has just blown a hole in basically every anti-AI claim involving image generation. The claim, which is at the center of so many lawsuits, is that AIs just imitate the works of artists, and an artist's painting being in the training data is what allows the AI to create something similar, and that, according to their legal briefs, means copyright infringement. They want credit. They want to be paid a license fee. They want to be paid in damages. And it turns out, the entire basis for their claim is as false as it can be. The research from MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, or CSAIL, shows that for any model trained on any sufficiently large dataset, you can remove any single image from the training data, any individual artist's portfolio, or every single portrait of a given person, and it doesn't alter the outputs in any detectable way. And that being the case, it means that that artwork or portrait or image doesn't have any responsibility for the final output. Quote, "Here, we show that models trained with enough data often generate samples that are unattributable. We establish this through a large-scale analysis of what-if scenarios, revealing that we can often omit any sample or creator from the training data without affecting a generated sample. Models work on the aggregate, taking every image they've ever seen and not memorizing them, but learning in general how images work and how they're associated with prompts, faces, poses, and various other aspects that can be used as inputs to generate something novel." Lead author Zhang Dai said, quote, "If you take away a piece of data and the output of the model doesn't change, then that piece of data didn't affect the output. So it doesn't make much sense to attribute the output to that piece of data. And if you then do this one at a time for every other piece of data and find that the output doesn't change for any of them either, then it doesn't make much sense to attribute the output to any one of them." This is something that's been known about diffusion models from the start, at least to everyone who has a basic understanding of the theory behind how they work, but this is the first time we have direct and unmistakable proof of it. Co-author David K. Gifford said, quote, "All previous methods were approximate. They really could not absolutely show that deleting individual things did not change the output. This paper introduces the first method that is absolute. You're actually deleting the inputs and deleting all influences of the inputs. This is the first exact method for doing large-scale deletion efficiently and showing that the results don't change." To do this, they built an architecture called Diffusion Ensemble. Instead of one gigantic multi-gigabyte model, they made 24 ensembles on variably sized datasets of 7 publicly accessible image datasets. That let them switch off parts of the models that were based on a particular image, no retraining needed, and the results are definitive, not approximate. They then put their model head-to-head with 24 diffusion models trained the conventional way on the exact same data. By every standard measure, the images produced by the ensemble were every bit as good as the conventionally trained models. In fact, some were actually better. Turns out, the more training data, the better the ensembles held up against their single model counterparts. They even stress-tested their own results to control for other model features such as ablation, number of training epochs, class conditioning, and several others. And the results surprised even the researchers. Gifford said, quote, "One way to think about this is that these models are creative. They are not simply copying what they are fed, but creating brand new outputs. If those outputs have nothing to do with any individual piece of training data, that raises questions about fair use, about whether the outputs are themselves copyrightable as novel works, and about how authors get compensated when what comes out of a model isn't attributable to anything on the internet." Which spells trouble for many of the anti-AI lawsuits, which claim that the work of particular artists are being infringed in the outputs. Because if you can remove their work and get the same result, that's not infringement. That's fair use. Cornell law professor James Grimmelman said, quote, If attribution worked, it would reliably tell us whether similarities between a model's output and a copyright-protected work are due to copying or coincidence. But this paper provides reason to think that attribution will fail for interesting models. Instead, technologists and courts will need to resort to other methods for assessing copying. And remember, this isn't just some fly-by-night research paper. It's from the prestigious MIT, peer-reviewed and published in one of the most respected science journals in the world. And that paper found, quote, unattributability is an important consideration for the governance of generative models. A notable example is the commercial use of generative models trained on copyrighted material to produce market substitutes of said material. In this case, unattributability ostensibly provides a refutation of access, a key element used in establishing infringement. On the one hand, attribution decay means that models are naturally endowed with a privacy property that arises when they are trained on enough data. For example, our experiments show that generated images of people are often causally independent of the people who were used to train it, effectively preserving their privacy as long as sufficient data was used to train the generative model. Which should put the kibosh on not only the copyright lawsuits, but any claims that these models can be used to create abusive material of real people. In other words, every single reason to regulate them is now thoroughly debunked.